The identity of this little girl is 100% not Susie, the girl who goes on to possess Chica. Susie has been dead for a long time once the game takes place, being dead for over 50 years or so. So there is literally no possible way that this girl could be Susie. You may be thinking that she could be possessed by Susie, but we released her spirit in the Happiest Day minigame, and she has only possessed Chica as far as we've known. Some assume that the Happiest Day minigame takes place at the end of the timeline, however I don't think that's true. Considering how FNAF 3 was supposed to be the end, and that when FNAF 3 is over we get the good ending, to me that indicates that the Happiest Day minigame takes place in FNAF 3, especially considering how the simulated pizzeria FNAF 6 does not have to lure the original animatronics back to the pizzeria, meaning that they did not need to be released because, well, they had already been dealt with. So about this girl, let's go over some evidence about what we see on the poster. Firstly, there is her blonde hair. We know that it's blonde thanks to the rim lighting on the character being blonde at her hair, and while yes it may seem stupid, I think that the general consensus is that this girl is blonde. While rim lighting is the color of the light that it is instead of the color of the person, it also isn't going to be yellow on a darker surface, so this means that her hair is not black, eliminating Cassidy from the race. So this is not the spirit that was possessing Golden Freddy, or who a good amount of people consider the one you should not have killed, aka the vengeful spirit from Ultimate Custom Night. The girl in the middle is also wearing a jacket and what appears to be a denim skirt, fingerless gloves, white socks, and sneakers that light up Skechers style. Hashtag not sponsored, but like Skechers, hit me up, we can probably work something out. Now this may not be out of the ordinary to any of you, but this instantly reminded me of someone from a previous game. As I did mention this in another video, Elizabeth Afton. Okay, I get that she's been dead for longer than Susie, but just hear me out, okay? See, when we were playing Sister Location, we ended up getting the cutscene where Elizabeth is grabbed and killed by Baby, turning Baby's eye color from blue to green. This outfit that this mysterious girl is wearing is nearly identical to the one that Elizabeth was wearing in that minigame, aside from the light up shoes that wouldn't be available for another decade by real world standards. However, in FNAF in 1983, they also had discs that emitted sounds that altered the appearance of things in your brain. So a couple of light up shoes 10 years early doesn't really seem like that much of a stretch. The skirt is also identical to the skirt that Elizabeth wears in that cutscene, and the jacket could easily be covering up a similar styled shirt, which could be pushing the idea that Gregory having two stripes on his shirt is definitely important. But I want to talk about the color. You see, there is no real color on this girl. Bumping up the saturation, brightness, or vibrance actually shows that this girl is drawn in black and white. Have you ever heard of the saying, lack of evidence is sometimes itself evidence? Like maybe you're dealing with a professional killer, or that these thieves are overly cautious. Well, I think that this is a similar situation. Think about it. Why would they draw this girl in black and white? I mean, yeah, sure, she's backlit, but being backlit doesn't make you grayscale. This is an indication that the color of this girl's clothing can possibly mean something. Maybe Scott thought that he was too subtle with Gregory, only putting two stripes on his shirt, so this time he went for the full outfit including color. Speaking of color, there's also the matter of her shoes, the only part of her that isn't rimlit that has color. The color of her lights being purple and red. Purple obviously being a nod to William Afton, aka the Purple Guy, a character so synonymous with purple that I can't wear my favorite shirt on this channel now without being called a serial killer. And red, while misleading, actually does tie back to Elizabeth Afton in the form of Baby. Her entire outfit was red, including her bright red hair, and I mean, like, it seems fairly reasonable to assume that this girl has at least a connection to the Afton family, although there is another explanation for the red on her shoes. Give me a minute. Given that the other two humans on this screen, Vanny and Gregory, are also connected to the Aftons, we can guess that this is the case with the blonde girl as well. However, I don't think that the girl herself is Elizabeth. Here's the wow moment, alright? I think that this girl is possessed by Elizabeth. Yeah, I know, right? Hear me out. I know I said that that's not possible with Susie, but that's because we freed her, alright? There are 7 faces on the Blob, the secret antagonist of Security Breach. 4 of them have lit red eyes, and 2 of them don't. The 4 that do are Naked Endo, FNAF 1 Bonnie, FNAF 1 Chica, and Mangle, all of which are somehow present in some form or another in the Pizzaplex. Mangle is Roxy, Bonnie was Bonnie, Chica was Chica, and we fight multiple endos on multiple occasions. The 2 that aren't present, however, don't have their eyes lit up, Baby and the puppet. But we know that fire doesn't do anything to Remnant, clearly. I mean, Afton has burned, what, 3 times now, and none have stuck? And in another video, we determined that the spirits can only be freed when they get their unfinished business resolved, like the missing children in Happiest Day. Baby also doesn't seem too happy about burning in FNAF 6. She in fact says that she wants to make her daddy proud, and dying to fire would really do the opposite considering how many he survived. So, much like we suspect Michael could have, Elizabeth could have swapped bodies as well into one of the missing children that Vanny took. Hell, that could have been why Vanny took them in the first place. Afton wanted his daughter to have a vessel, hence why this one looks so much like Elizabeth's original body. This also explains why there is red on her shoes, because it's meant to represent the glowing red eyes that would be in the animatronic head. Remember, it's damn hard to kill an Afton for good, and in the books, Baby is really the one orchestrating everything, at least when it comes to the Afton amalgamation. Especially since this girl is facing away, her eyes could also be green. And I have a feeling that throughout the game we will see her eyes either flip-flop or start off blue and become green or something like that. Or, what I think would be the coolest way to do this would be having her eyes green normally, like if we see it in like a camera or something, but be blue in a mirror. So, here's how I think the story went. After the FNAF 6 fire, William gets a hold of Vanny in order to get his body back. He creates through the company a new location on top of the old one to hide his deeds, and then he sets himself free. In the process though, he notices that his daughter's spirit is also stuck. Since this is the first time they've been together since he put her in the basement of sister location, he decides to help her out, and causes Vanny to start abducting kids who look like his in an effort to rebuild his former family. Given that his youngest son is either still possessing him or now loose to the elements as well, the blonde girl is then kidnapped and Elizabeth finds her suitable host, so she's possessed. And now she follows Vanessa around in an effort to keep an eye on her and remind her that Afton is always watching. She starts manipulating her through encoded chats and messages, and hacks the FNAF AR animatronics to cause them to malfunction, and gets Vanessa promoted to security guard to keep an even closer eye on her. As a part of her observations, she starts therapy just like Vanessa does, and despite her telling the truth about her family history, it doesn't line up with the girl that she's possessed. Hence the one therapist calling out Client 46 for it, and her explanation about what happened to her family seeming to lack emotion, since after all she watched it happen as Baby instead of experiencing it as an actual child. After the collapse, she is either brought back by Afton requesting help with himself, or possibly also to help secure the vessel for Crying Child, who escaped along with a Michael possessed Glamrock Freddy. To me, this seems like a game about reuniting with lost brothers, lost hope, but most of all, reuniting a family. The Afton family. After all, we have all the characters now. The misguided father whose misdeeds cost him everything, his loyal daughter who wants to see her family back, the mother who now agrees and is a part of the father's plan, even if unwillingly so, and the sons, one too scared to do anything, and the older brother who helps him beat the circle that their father created, who rights their wrongs and makes up for their family's sins. What do you think? I feel like I'm pretty spot on with this one, and that this could be a great launching point for the next part of the series, but let me know what you think down below. In a 10 FNAF ARG. This was brought up in an older, or kind of like a recent but not the most recent matpat FNAF theory, and people were starting to suggest that actually like an ARG would be involved in the DLC. The basic idea being that the FNAF Fazbear Frights books were originally going to have an ARG that Scott ended up cutting out for whatever reason, and then released as part of the Felix the Shark book as the extra couple stories. But I'm here to tell you that that's probably not real, alright? Scott has said on multiple occasions that he doesn't want to cross the line between fact and fiction, and that he wanted to keep these two worlds separate. Probably because, you know, FNAF relates so closely to Chuck E. Cheese. And that's also why he would have never made a real location. Or at least he didn't until the announcement, or I guess the discovery of the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza delivery service. The digital restaurant delivery service in the works since at least January of 2021. So yeah, maybe it's more accurate than we thought. In a 9 Into the Pit. This is crazy, I will admit, okay? It's most definitely not the case, but I just want it to be real, okay? FNAF has already established time travel as possible in the very first Fazbear Frights book called Into the Pit. Remember that one? It's the title story as well, where Oswald ends up jumping into a ball pit and then somehow leaving 2011 and appearing in 1985 to witness the missing children's incident. Yeah, that story wasn't written for no reason, okay? And where do we see the first ball pit that wasn't in a pizzeria simply meant to lure animatronics around? Oh, would you look at that? The Mega Pizzaplex, mother. I'm just saying, the time travel is already established as canon in the series, and considering how sketchy Gregory is, I wouldn't put him past him from being from the future or something, alright? There are two key indicators that in my mind point to this. The therapy disc, where the therapist calls client 46 out on the lies of their home life, and the fact that when Gregory leaves the Pizzaplex in the worst ending, he sleeps in a cardboard box. The therapist in that tape says that 46, who it can still be Gregory, it might be the little girl who was in the poster for this DLC, but if it is Gregory, he has a great home life, okay? But like what they told their previous therapist was a lie. So if that was the case and his home life is great, why is he sleeping in a cardboard box, okay? Like, he says his parents suffered some form of tragedy and he's sleeping in a box, but apparently if he is 46 at least, that's not true. Yeah, maybe because it hasn't happened yet, okay? The tragedy where he most likely loses his parents hasn't happened as of when the game takes place. And that's why he can't actually go home to see them, because then there'll be two Gregorys and they're like, what? How? And it ain't Susie. The girl in the center of the FNAF Security Breach Ruins poster is most likely our player character for this game. But, given the blonde hair and the cheek on the poster, could Susie be the FNAF Security Breach DLC main character? Now, your first instinct may be that this is impossible. That was my first instinct too. I mean, like, Susie's been dead since 1985 with the missing children's incident, and she ends up possessing Chica, who is then set free in Happiest Day. But, in the original novel trilogy, starting with the Silver Eyes, the Funtime animatronics are described as being injected with Remnant made from the original 5 possessed animatronics, meaning that if Remnant does contain at least part of a soul, that the original 5, despite being set free in Happiest Day, no matter when Happiest Day takes place in the timeline, could still have the slightest bit of spirit form in the main world, since they would have been an Ennard who, at least at this point, is Molten Freddy. I don't think that there is any explanation that could mean that this is Susie's original body. That seems like some supernatural shenanigan Lazarus pit kind of crap, and just seems fundamentally impossible. But could Susie have latched onto a new body? Maybe. And it's 1 year later. With the DLC not releasing until 2023, the question remains of when in the timeline the DLC will take place. Yes, it will take place after the true ending for Security Breach, obviously, but how long after is the actual question. See, with the state of the animatronics, it seems like it could be later on, and like with the release date being 2 years after the release of the original game, it means that it could be linear in a timeline sense, so maybe it would also take place 2-ish years after the ending, or maybe just 1 year, depending on how you look at it, I don't know. But then that would also bring on the question of why Gregory is trapped if it's a year or two later. And then we also have to ask, you know, who is this girl and why is she coming to this abandoned pizza place 2 years later when she is again the size of a 6-year-old and alone? You know, she's not like an urban explorer teen with her friends, so yeah. And while there are theories about it, this one specifically about it being like a year later is from Amanda specifically, but I don't know. We don't know and we won't know until it's released. But hopefully it is right, because I would love to see how Gregory survived for a year. And at 6, Help Me. Very reminiscent of the Same Them minigame from the earlier FNAF games, and I think it was FNAF 2. You can see Gregory's face on the bottom left monitor with the phrase "Help Me" underscore written in big green lettering. This to me seems to indicate that we may have a potential plot idea brewing where we need to save Gregory and Freddy after the collapse of the Pizzaplex, because I mean, like, we know that Gregory and Freddy are sitting on the hill in the final shot of the true game, and they're also sitting on the hill alone, meaning that if we do end up saving him, our player character is probably going to die in the process. This also means that we won't be playing this game as Gregory, obviously. I mean, I've already talked about it before. But the underscore here could also be like another indication of Gregory being a robot, if you want to look at it like that, which is kind of insane. And it's a bit of a stretch, but I mean, oh well. But it could also just be a reference to a file within the game files, or a file within the DLC files that could contain additional information. But I have no idea if that's true, or if it's just speculation. But given the fact that people think that there's an ARG, maybe a file that is help me underscore, since underscores are primarily used for putting spaces in file names without actually having to use spaces. I don't know, maybe that's something that we should look into when it's released. Maybe it'll have a little bit more info for us. Halfway through into number 5, Justice for Bonnie. Bonnie was missing from Security Breach, having been most likely destroyed by Monty, but perhaps getting to investigate Bonnie's disappearance and being able to change how things go with I don't know, just like the story of Fazbear Entertainment going forward, would be an interesting mission. If we were meant to actually like truly investigate it, that is, I guess, like turn maybe at least part of the DLC into a bit of a detective game, I think that would be like a really fun, compelling, and like good side story. I don't know. And from what I've seen, we all want justice for Bonnie, especially since we want Papa Freddy to be reunited with Bonnie, since he seemingly really misses him, considering the dialogue from the first recharge station, when Gregory asks him about Vanny, and Freddy says, "There is no Bunny in the Pizzaplex." Not anymore, in a very somber way, but I still don't trust Freddy, so I don't really care. I just want to be a detective like Batman. Plus, I mean, we also don't have any good animatronics this time around to help protect us, since Freddy is trapped, so maybe this will be the way for us to get another Guardian, since Freddy's with Gregory. And then there you go, you also get Choose Your Guardian. You're welcome. You can have that one for free! Steel Wool, just please respond to me on Twitter. For level 10. Now, the highest security level access that you can get in the main game is level 8. This just requires you to do every of the like security room mini games. However, with level 8 being the highest that you can actually achieve, it begs the question as to why there are doors with level 10 security. Because if it's impossible to achieve that level, what's the point of giving them a security level at all? I mean, there are doors that are actively locked and don't open at all, that aren't blocked. So like, why not just make the doors that you would have made level 10 just impenetrable? It doesn't seem efficient to me, okay? They could have been saving these areas for this DLC, and they could add maybe 2 more security pass rooms, since like if you end up no-clipping past the doors with level 10, there is nothing behind them at all. So I mean, I don't know, it would be nice to get some additional areas in the DLC. These level 10 areas would give us that little extra sense of new content while also expanding the Pizzaplex in a relatively reasonable way, and especially considering how we've now had the place collapse, those level 10 doors still being shut would be a bummer. Getting close to the end at number 3, Prisoner. Now, time to get into some theories about our little blondie in the middle, alright? Who is she? I don't know. I doubt that it's Susie, like I've mentioned earlier. But I've mentioned in previous videos how she looks an awful lot like the middle silhouette of the 9 children who have gone missing due to Vanny on the newspaper, and I still stand by that point, okay? I think they look similar. So, the most realistic answer that I have is that it's one of the missing children who aren't actually dead, and that they were instead trapped in the building somewhere, much like how Vanny in the first trailer for the game says that she has Gregory's friends here with her. So clearly Gregory must have known the kids that have gone missing, which actually would explain why he came to the pizza place in the first place. It doesn't really explain how he never mentions them throughout the whole game, but who knows, okay? Either way, it's a very real possibility that this blonde girl is just a missing kid who, thanks to the collapse, managed to escape containment like an SCP gone wild. But ultimately, in at number 2, No More Freddy. It is also possible that Freddy is destroyed, or that he just won't be in this DLC at all thanks to the statue we see on the poster. This poster could be an indication of what happened to Freddy after the Pizzaplex's collapse. I mean, like, it did destroy Chica pretty well, right? So, like, wouldn't it have destroyed Freddy too? Like, yes, he ends up on the hill with Gregory, but, like, I mean, it could be a dream, right? Or maybe it's like a heaven, maybe they're both dead. That scene could be several years after the actual ending to the game. We could have just seen the end of the FNAF series with that shot, okay? We can't be certain. Or at the very least, the game could be just omitting Freddy, and he won't make an appearance because they couldn't get the voice actor or something, for whatever reason, hence why his statue is destroyed, okay? The thing is in pieces. Have you seen the poster? But why is it? We don't know. There isn't much rubble around it. The escalator walls are less damaged than this statue, so I don't know why the statue would be so destroyed if nothing around it actually seems broken, but you know, I don't know. And finally, in at number 1, Elizabeth Afton. I've mentioned before how both these kids, Gregory and this girl, look like Afton kids. Gregory is very clearly meant to be at least an allegory for Crying Child, okay? Stripes on the shirt, the age, the relationship with Freddy, it's right there in our faces, okay? Whether you believe he's a robot or not doesn't matter. He's at least meant to represent Crying Child. And now, look at this girl. While she may be in mostly black and white, she is very clearly blonde, okay? She has pigtails like Baby does, and we all know who Elizabeth was possessing. Yeah, Baby. She's also wearing a skirt exactly like Elizabeth was wearing at the time she ended up getting caught in Sister Location. And I mean, like, if Crying Child's 2 stripes are enough for a comparison, then I think that this is more than enough. The outfit is basically the same. And then, look at her shoes. The lights are the only thing that has color on them on this character, which is very clearly meant to draw our attention to it, and then those lights are purple and red. Purple representing AFTON obviously, and red could be Vanny, maybe it's supposed to be Vanny's eyes, but baby is absolutely covered in red, okay, from her clothes to her hair. Red is all over that animatronic. Plus, if this girl's in black and white, maybe she's just a ghost, maybe she's not actually real, maybe it's just Elizabeth's spirit coming after her brother.
Number 10. How many is too many? Speaking of multiple ports across consoles, it's important to note that likely part of the delay for the Rune DLC was thanks to Steel Wool Studios also busting their game developing butts to get us the Xbox version of Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach, which actually only came out late last year, if you could believe that. That's right, that's almost a year after the initial release of this game. Sorry friends on Xbox. And the other thing that might cause you some worry to know is that Steel Wool Studios, following their work on Security Breach, is not necessarily prioritizing the Rune DLC, as the studio is actually also working on multiple titles now, having branched out to work on other projects at the same time, so it's not just FNAF, including things like Hello Neighbor 2 DLC and the game Hello Neighbor Search and Rescue. The only good news here is that they have also worked to expand their staff, doubling in size, so that should basically help them, I guess, to work on multiple projects at once and still remain just as, if not more, effective. At least that's what we're hoping for, and I'm sure that's what they're hoping for too, so fingers crossed. Number 9. Available on all platforms. This is good news, because it means that no matter where you bought this game, you will be guaranteed this DLC if you want it. But on the other hand, it could be a big part of the reason behind the delay we seem to be feeling or experiencing when it comes to the Rune DLC. I feel like it's been so long. I actually had to be like, oh man, how long ago did this game come out? I had to re-look it up. I forgot. It's so long ago now. Basically, it has been over a year, and we were kind of expecting, I think, that the DLC would be here sooner, perhaps already even. The more platforms a game or DLC is released on, the more time it's probably going to take the game or the content to be completed. This is because each port requires a little bit of tweaks, and these can be more or less tweaks depending on the engine that you're using to build the game initially with, and if that engine is better for PC or console, and if it's not good for one or the other, you know, what level of tweaks are we talking here? Big ones, small ones, what are we talking about? Releasing something on multiple platforms also usually means that one of the platforms at least is going to be a bit janky upon release. Although I feel like glitches in games bother us less now, as we've become accustomed to all games and video game content being some level of buggy upon first release, so, you know, maybe we don't have to worry too much about that, but I don't know, Security Breach was pretty janky. Gonna be real. Alright friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Gaming, if you want more FNAF content, let us know by clicking that subscribe button. When you subscribe, we get closer and closer to Rune DLC. Actually, I heard for every time you click subscribe, like you can click it, unclick it, click it again, keep doing that back and forth, a week gets knocked off the Rune DLC timeline, so it'll be here sooner. So click it. Number 8, 2023. Okay, this isn't too scary admittedly. I mean, this does mean we can probably expect the game later this year, at some point, right? Well, what if that isn't true? After all, dates get pushed back all the time, especially when you only have a month and a year expected release date for video game projects. And this is a project that we don't even have both of those things for as of yet. All we know is the year. 2023. I also just feel like not having even a month guideline means that it's likely we're not going to see this game for a while, or this DLC for a while. Even if it's not pushed to next year, we could have to wait until maybe the end of 2023 in December to see the game. I mean, if we only know it's being released this year, it could be released, keep in mind, as late as December 31st, 2023, because that would still be 2023. And that honestly feels right now, that feels really far away. Like it was just December a minute ago, so we got a ways to go. Maybe not scary, but definitely a little bit depressing to think about when it comes to just how little we know in terms of this DLC's release date, or you know, lack thereof, I guess I should say. Number 7, not just a concept. Here is something that is less scary to ease the revelation of where Steel Wool was reported to be at in November with this DLC, and how they basically were just past, you know, that concept stage. They went on to say in their announcement, the vertical slice build was the very first one in my career that was a complete actual VC with functional versions of all the gameplay elements and systems we'd intended to build. Our team is absolutely crushing it, and we couldn't be prouder of them. We're fired up and can't wait to share more with you all. This is more promising because it kind of seems like their VC is more of a realized concept anyways. However, once again, I would take even this moment of brief celebration from Steel Wool's executive producer Ray McCaffrey with a grain of salt, because the fact that a vertical slice exists could also be a sign of danger ahead when it comes to what's going on with the Rune DLC and honestly the game studio, Steel Wool Studios itself. Number 6. The protagonist has entered the chat. But who is she? Other than seemingly being the protagonist based on her stance in this poster with her little flashlight, we don't really know who this girl is. Is she Elizabeth Afton like many people claim because they think her hair is blonde? Is it even blonde? And if so, if she is Elizabeth Afton, how is that even possible? Or is she someone totally new? And if so, will we like her more or less than Gregory? Will she be just as sadistic? Will she matter to the lore, or will she just be some random character that doesn't really develop? Also, is Gregory coming back? I mean, he's on the poster too. He's probably coming back. I have more questions than answers for you on this point, and for that, I am sorry. But also, that's kind of just FNAF for you, I suppose. Even when we think we know things, really they are all just theories that we take at face value as facts because, well, I mean, otherwise we'd really know nothing about these games. And also, I mean, that's part of the fun. We like to try to follow the clues and then try to figure out what the facts are or could be plausibly. Something that I think could be true and would explain some of the red coloring perhaps on her shoes as well as the purple is that the little girl could have some connection to Vanessa, aka Vanny. I think that could also be a thing. I don't know if other people have been saying that. I haven't been deep into the theories in a little bit, but I feel like I haven't seen that one yet, so I don't know. If that's new, let me know. If it's not new, let me know who else is saying it, because maybe I should watch their content more, because I'm vibing with that. Number 5. Vertical slice completed. In an announcement that Steel Wool Studios shared on their site, they mentioned that the process for Security Breach Rune was going well, and that they were moving ahead of schedule. But don't get too excited. They simply stated, and I quote, "We don't have any gameplay details that we're ready to share, but we can talk about where we're at in development. Pursuant to growing our processes, the Security Breach team spent significant time in rigorous pre-production process, focusing on streamlining our ability to construct fun, stable gameplay. So far, this year, we have delivered on our vertical slice milestone earlier than planned and are ahead of schedule for a major upcoming development milestone." What does that mean? What is a vertical slice? A vertical slice, or VC, is basically like a pitch for a game, a concept of a game. This is what game developers use usually to get investors hooked on the game in order to, raise enough funds, collect in the money so that they can then, bring that game to life. So what does that mean? It simply means that Steel Wool Studios has their concept down. Well, not only that, it was actually completed ahead of schedule. So while that's, promising to hear, ahead of schedule, we like that, it is a little frightening to know that they reported this in November of 2022, so it's only a few months ago. So, I mean, if that just happened, and I mean we don't really have a clear timeline for when the VC was completed, admittedly, we might still be pretty far out in terms of design and gameplay features, because, that's a concept. So, we can work with that, it's something, but it's not like, oh, in like 2 weeks it'll be done, just polishing it up. Number 4, it's free? I think this is one of the scariest things I've actually heard about this DLC, and I'm gonna tell you why. I know what you're thinking. Amanda, don't we want this DLC to be free? Isn't that nice? Then we save money, which means we have more money to undoubtedly spend on more video games, yay! And aren't we owed this in some way after Security Breach was not quite as good as we expected? First of all, no one is really ever owed almost anything. You paid for a game, you got a game, if there were parts you didn't like, that's unfortunate, but it doesn't mean anyone actually owes you a thing more than what you got. Unless it was, it may be helplessly broken or unplayable in some way. Then they probably owe you something, because you bought a game, you don't really get a game because you can't really play it. Secondly, I'm worried about runes being free because it makes me think it will be shorter than what we're hoping for. And granted, it's been in the works for what feels like forever. I mean, if it releases in December, it'll be like 2 years since the initial release of Security Breach. But what if it's not a whole other additional story? What if it's like just cosmetics somehow or something ridiculous? Or like a small like extra chapter? Like what if it's 10 minutes of game? I don't know. When things are free, it just makes me nervous that it's because the product can't actually be considered worth paying for. Because like, why are you giving this to me for free? Like, I'm just a person, someone's like, this is free. I'm like, what's wrong with it? I don't know. I've been burned too many times from free content and items, I guess. Number 3, a new foe, or perhaps a new ally. Some have taken to using the poster to basically decode what this game is really about, when it takes place, who's in it, who's the main character, who are all of the characters. Of course, at the end of the day, it's just a poster, so I mean, it's kind of hard to accept all of the wild theories and all of the things people seem to be coming up with to answer these questions, but one that I do feel has some merit and that we can classify as kind of a no on some level is the new enemy that people are spotting in the poster. In the top left corner of the promotional poster, if you haven't seen this yet, there are 2 glowing red eyes, or I mean what appear to be red eyes. We don't really know if they are, but they definitely look like that. Now while Vanny also has red eyes, so did the blob we saw at the end of the game, and many are thinking that these eyes seem to kind of line up with the seemingly amalgamated blob entity we saw a little bit more than Vanny, which I also personally see. Interesting counterpoint though to this being the potential main enemy of the next game, what if this is actually our ally in the game? I mean, after all, the blob did kind of save our butts in the end in Security Breach, whether intentionally or simply because it had its own vendetta against AFTON. I'd be curious to know why specifically. If it is our enemy, it like wants to be our enemy, especially if we're playing as like a nameless girl who maybe has no connection to anything. Unless maybe this girl happens to be an AFTON, and then, I mean, maybe. I mean, did she do something terrible though? She's just a girl, so I don't know. More sadistic than Gregory, she is just like William Afton, murdering people left and right. Goodness. Number 2, disillusionment. A vertical slice isn't just a tool to be used for developers as a guide when they're building the world and creating the game or the DLC. A vertical slice can also be something that's actually requested by investors. In fact, this can happen when investors actually have no real knowledge of the video game industry and what goes, into building a video game more specifically, or when the investors simply don't have a lot of confidence in the project based on the knowledge they do have of the studio and their body of work, or the project in question itself. There's just something about it they don't get. Basically they're like, we'd like to see more information, like we need a pitch. If this is the case with Rune, and of course it very well might not be. The VC could, just be for in-house development, or it could be a routine part of their process in relation to their investors. This could be an indicator that either investors are attached to this project who have no clue what is getting made here, or worse, they don't have a lot of confidence in what's being made. So, it's possible. Number 1, silver lining. Despite this being a scary list, I feel like I need to end this on a high note, because at the end of the day, as FNAF fans, we're all hopeful for the continuation of the video game franchise, and we want to see it succeed. Successful adaptations, games, DLC, all of this only means that we have a better chance of getting more and more quality content for years to come. Fingers crossed. So, what I want to add is that although the vertical slice could be something for us to be worried about, generally speaking, it seems for Steel Wool to be something they actively wanted to improve on, because in that same announcement from November 2022 where they updated us a bit, they discussed changes they made as well as things they wanted to personally improve on. One of those things, a major point in fact, seemed to be for them that they wanted to focus on their pre-production process. Now why is this important to note? Why does that even matter? Interesting story of the Security Breach game, its plot and the execution of said plot. It's easy to see how this could actually kind of be the result of poor planning actually. Like some of the issues in this game could be because their planning phase wasn't as great as it could have been. Same with some gameplay features such as the vastness of the map, which wasn't really utilized as much as I think we'd all hoped it would be, with whole areas designed and built into the massive like mega pizzaplex, but seemingly existing without really having any purpose to serve in the game. Which you could go there and explore it, but like you don't really do stuff there. So hopefully they're figuring out those kinks.
Last time I came to the conclusion that this mysterious girl is one of this round's missing children that got possessed by Elizabeth, and while I do still firmly believe that, this got me thinking who else could it possibly be. We asked you loyal subscribers on a community post, and the overwhelming conclusion was that the majority of you are wrong. Okay, just kidding. A lot of you though seem to think that this could be Vanessa as a ghost. And despite the fact that Vanny's eyes are on the poster, I think that you might actually be onto something, so let's talk about it. Although I just need to put this out there, the identity of this little girl is 100% not Susie, the girl who possesses Chica, okay? Susie has been dead for a very long time when this game takes place, being dead over 50 years or so, and while that doesn't really matter in the context of FNAF, there's still no way it could be. You may be thinking that she could be possessed by Susie, but we release Susie's spirit in the Happiest Day minigame. Some assume that this takes place at the end of the timeline, however I don't think that's true, considering how FNAF 3 was supposed to be the end, and that's when FNAF 3 is over and we get the good ending. So to me, that indicates that the Happiest Day minigame takes place around the time of FNAF 3, especially considering how the simulated pizzeria from FNAF 6 didn't have to lure the original animatronics back to the pizzeria, meaning that they did not need to be released, because they had already been dealt with. So in regards to this theory, the first thing I need to disprove is that it's impossible, since Vanny's eyes are in the corner. But just because we see some faded eyes, it doesn't mean that a spirit cannot be separate from a body. I mean, look at AFTON, for example. This man was code that possessed a human while his body was stuck in an underground pizzeria. So there is a precedent for their body being around without their soul. The issue in my mind comes around when we see that since Vanny's eyes are glowing, her body is operational, which kinda shoots this theory between the eyes until you remember that there are multiple things possessing Vanny's body. One version of Glitchtrap's code and then Vanessa herself. So we can go one of two ways with this now. The fact that Vanny's body may solely be Glitchtrap now, or the fact that Glitchtrap is still operating in Vanessa, but Burntrap is also AFTON. He's back as AFTON, okay? Either way, there are two versions of AFTON in operation right now. One of them is coded and the other is possibly not, but we can't really be sure. And William isn't the only person to have a coded version. I mean, remember Princess Quest? The game designed to keep Vanessa at bay while William wreaks havoc as Vanny? I mean, the Princess Quest ending, otherwise known as the best ending, is the only ending to have 3 stars. It had some significance, but what? It's a question we've been asking ever since Security Breach ended. Another one is what happened to the Princess Quest game machines located around the Pizzaplex. It seems reasonable that at the very least the one in Roxy's salon was destroyed, and if the Pizzaplex is in ruins, then the others must have been destroyed too, right? Well, if that is the case, what happens to Vanessa's spirit? Like, is it released, or does it fade away into nothing? It's not fading away, not with unfinished business still afoot. The spirit of Vanessa had to go somewhere, but where could it go? Well, this could be some random girl that Vanessa just grabbed off the street or that was walking by, or it could still be one of the missing children that was trapped in the building. Either way, whoever they are, it's really of little consequence if this is really Vanessa possessing them. Okay, the only thing that matters in this context is that Vanessa's possessing them, not who the kid is, I'm guessing. The precedent is set in this universe where one person can possess multiple things if one version that is possessing something is coded and the other is a spirit. So this is definitely possible. The character on the poster is also actually completely grayscale, aside from the rim lighting thanks to her flashlight and the color of her lights on the shoes that she's wearing. These are also colored purple and red, colors that in this game specifically are linked to William because it's purple. I mean, I can't even wear a shirt on this channel now without being called the purple guy. So yeah, purple equals AFTON, Burntrap, William, whatever. And then Vanny with her giant glowing red eyes are also on this poster, okay? It's like they wanted us to make this connection. But if they wanted us to make the connection, does that mean that this is all intentional, or is it mostly just a red herring or MacGuffin to keep us away from the real story? That's for you to debate in the comments. Either way, I think that the possibility of this girl being possessed by Vanessa is absolutely possible, especially since she could be just a manifestation of the player character from Princess Quest, just kind of modernized because, you know, it's FNAF, we can't really argue with that kind of thing. Which I'm sure would make a lot of people mad if that is the case, because everyone thinks that the girl from Princess Quest is Cassidy or Golden Freddy, but that's not canon because that name was scrapped from the files, okay? Someone at Steelwool may just have not known the significance of that name and like named the character after their daughter or something, or after a sister or whatever, okay? So no way to be sure, but that name has been confirmed as not canon, so What do you think, okay? I mean, the majority of you did think that it was Vanessa in the community post, but what do you think after watching both of these videos? Okay, be sure you let me know down below, and if you haven't seen the other one, okay, the link will be at the end of this video for you, because that's just the kind of generous, beautiful, exotic, absolutely befuddling human being that I am. I'm also very humble. I'm still banking on the Elizabeth train, but it really depends for where they want to go with the series next. Like, they could go Invasion of the Body Snatchers and get Vanessa to claim her body back, or they could go with a family reunited. Well, as far as we can, since the Pizzaplex, or at least part of it, seemingly gets destroyed at the end of the true ending. So, when we choose to stay, is it possible for Burntrap to have more of an impact? Well, it's not as clear as you might think. See, Burntrap at this moment is sat in the FNAF 6 pizzeria that's underneath the Pizzaplex, charging in his charging station. However, he only seems to come out of it when ourselves along with Gregory jump down into the final area. So to make this DLC possible, well, we would have to have him wake up for some other reason. Now technically it's unknown if when we drop down AFTON ironically wakes up at the same time, or if we triggered it somehow, but given that it's FNAF, I'm guessing that us triggering it is more probable and more in line with what the series story was intended to be. So for this DLC to include him, AFTON would need to wake up for some other reason, be it maybe a power surge or something that messed with his power supply or potentially gave him a boost that he needed to get out of the charger early. Now that AFTON is out of his charger for whatever reason, assuming that that's where the story goes, what could the possible DLC stories be? Well, I'm guessing that Burntrap would somehow be able to get back into the Pizzaplex, despite Freddy telling Gregory that the elevator would only be good for one trip. But who knows, maybe that's because of Gregory and Freddy's weight combined or something like that. Maybe with just AFTON in it, it would be able to make more than one trip, since after all it is how the animatronics were getting down to dig the tunnel in the first place, right? Anyways, AFTON probably would get back up and then start roaming around the Pizzaplex, probably corrupting anything that he could. This would probably lead to another ending where we would either defeat Burntrap in the Pizzaplex or then maybe have to lure him back down into the basement. But in my eyes, in my mind, I think that we should have to lure him down to the parts and service room. Mostly because Vanessa told us to come to the main stage once we got into the elevator when trying to escape after you get Roxy's eyes. But if you listen to Vanessa, then go check the stage. There's nothing there for you. It just seems to be a time waster so that Moondrop has a better chance of getting you. But in my eyes, this seems like more of a game mechanic thing than an in-game thing. Like in the game universe, all he would need to do to catch you is just make it to you instead of waiting until it's exactly 1 hour. So there would have to be some reason that she called you there in the first place, right? Well, maybe it's because that's where Burntrap was, and now we gotta bring him down to parts and service to dismantle him and end his spree for good. Maybe we can get some main antagonist action where the animatronics roaming the Pizzaplex are instead replaced with the main villains of Burntrap and Vanny. Kind of like Nightmare Fredbear, Nightmare, or Nightmarion style, since those characters also replaced all of the villains in FNAF 4 when they were out. This would definitely make Vanny and Burntrap seem more powerful and important than the other animatronics, especially if this only happened once we destroyed all three, since then we would assume that they were kind of tossed aside or forgotten since they didn't really work anymore. And I think that this would also help Burntrap be more menacing, because honestly, looking at him, this is the scariest design for AFTON yet. This is the most terrifying version of Springtrap that we have ever had, and we don't actually have to or get to interact with him directly. We don't have a reason to really be scared of him. He doesn't chase us, he doesn't have any real power over us, we burn him from a distance through monitors while pressing buttons, and he only tries to take control over Freddy instead of coming after us, which is what helped us think of this character as a waste. But having him chase us around the Pizzaplex would be an excellent way of making him more unique and terrifying, especially if periodically he would cause us to be forced out of Freddy while trying to take him over, and the only way that we could save Freddy would be maybe to press another button at a save station, or maybe try to activate a save station or something like that. Something that could possibly jam Afton's frequency or signal or something along those lines. Making Afton a bigger villain would definitely be a better way to go in my eyes, because this man was underused and really kind of wasted in this way. Especially if they do decide to kill him off permanently, since now he's just sentient code after having his soul burnt out of FNAF 6's fire. But having him chase us around the Pizzaplex and making the Freddy mech useless at times, and really just being a horrifying antagonist, would really help sell how terrifying this version was intended to be, and something I feel should have been in the base game, since, you know, he's the most iconic character in the entirety of the FNAF series, you know, purple guy, the main killer, something that was teased in the very first trailer and then yet maybe had 5 minutes of screen time, unless you're bad at the game like I am, and then in that case he had like 30 minutes to an hour of screen time. And don't even get me started on how horrible his death was, if that was even a death. Killing this man off screen is probably the rudest thing I think Scott could do to me. Like, I want to see this man, and this man being William, die. I want to be the one who causes it. I want to see the light leave his eyes. I want to see that last bit of code float into the air with his demonic purple eyes and then dissipate. Okay, I want to watch him suffer. It's the least that he deserves. Plus, with Burntrap and Vanny roaming the Pizzaplex, maybe we could actually figure out what happened to those other missing kids that potentially drew us to the Pizzaplex to begin with. I mean, Vanny says in the first trailer that they're supposed to be our friends, right? Like, I don't know, maybe she got to Gregory's orphanage, or like kind of like raided it with a bunch of animatronics. Man, like a World of Warcraft raid, but with animatronics. I don't know. Like, maybe this is the way that Vanny's room above Phaser Blast would be open for closer inspection without the Phaser Blast ending button. Maybe there's an additional secret room or duffel bag or like a present with some story lore that points to what really happened to those kids, and then we can actually go and try and figure it out. If they were killed maybe, or kidnapped, or used to fuel Afton. I mean, this could be a really good way for the story to really establish itself, since, you know, the game was released unfinished despite being a couple of years late. Maybe something like this was always intended, but since there were so many delays, we had to deal with an underused and hardly terrifying antagonist despite the ability to make him so much more. But then again, maybe I'm just enthusiastic and expecting too much from these games, which may or may not be a bad thing. There we have it, friends. Will we see Burntrap in the FNAF Security Breach DLC? I honestly think that it's possible, and it would make much more sense than any other character we've talked about. And I hope that we get more with this character, because he's the first version of Afton that actually scares me. Like, if that chased me, I'd actually be scared to play this game. Now, first, your instinct may be that this is impossible, okay? And honestly, that was my first instinct too. I mean, Susie's been dead since like 1985 with the missing children's incident, and she ends up possessing Chica, who is then set free and happy as a day. So like, how is it even remotely possible? Well, some say that the happiest day minigame that sets Susie free really takes place at the very end of the timeline, no matter when that ends up being, meaning that at the time of Security Breach, none of the original 5 animatronics have actually been released, which means that if we go off the fact that this girl is possessed, this is entirely possible. I mean, Susie is the first of the missing children, and definitely seemingly the most important one, given the fact that we see her as a kid in the Fruity Maze minigame's reflection. And I mean, even if the one you should not have killed is Cassidy, it's just a blown out version of her face. But the puppet is present for the Happiest Day minigame, and they get released in FNAF 6, right? There's one key detail, however, that really makes me unsure. Something that's been in the back of my brain for a while, but it may make a few people mad because it involves using the novels. In the original novel trilogy, starting with the Silver Eyes, the Funtime animatronics are injected with remnant made from the original 5 possessed animatronics, meaning that if remnant does indeed contain part of the soul instead of just being metal that once had a soul, the original 5, despite being set free in Happiest Day, no matter when it takes place, could still have the slightest bit of spirit form in the main world, I guess. Which could also explain why Molten Freddy had to show up along with Scrap Baby also known as Elizabeth in FNAF 6, unless we just assume that there was a slight bit of Elizabeth remaining inanimate after she left, or if we assume that Henry wanted to get rid of all traces of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, or all things that AFTON created, which at that point also included his son. That's a lot of assumptions. So without assuming anything, but also while using the books to get some further context, which some people don't like, it is possible that after they burned in FNAF 6, much like AFTON, Susie's spirit was set loose. Not free, like it didn't move on, but it was just loose in the atmosphere, willing to grab onto whatever it could. Or that it merged into the blob, and then the fire that Gregory causes, that caused the cave-in, ended up setting her soul loose again, and then she possessed a person. I don't think that there is really any explanation that could mean that this is Susie's original body. That seems fundamentally impossible. So whoever this is, if she is a character we've already met prior to this game, she would have to be possessed. Unless this is an entirely new character, which is absolutely possible. I mean, it doesn't have to be someone that's already established, obviously, but I mean, it's fun to speculate and theorize nonetheless. Another indication that I've seen a few people point out is that Chica does actually also appear on this poster, which is certainly an interesting choice. I mean, she was certainly the most popular enemy animatronic in this game, and the other animatronics are very out of commission even before the collapse. I mean, Roxy couldn't see, and Monty was split in two. But since we can't really take anything in FNAF at first glance, is this actually meant to indicate the identity of our mystery girl? It's certainly a possibility. I mean, the only ones who really know are Steelwool, Scott, and whoever made the poster. But given Chica's state, I'm guessing that this is just meant to indicate a timeline, that this occurs after the collapse rather than at some other time prior to the game starting, and then maybe they rebuild the Pizzaplex, or maybe even long after it ends. Because I mean, look at her, okay? Chica has got to be probably one of the most resilient animatronics in the group, because she's still kicking despite being crushed by a trash compactor and then having a building land on top of her, and she still has most of her smoking hot bod. Some of it was removed, some of it was cracked, but her face also has seemingly melted, possibly due to the fire we were using to kill Burn Trap, or maybe it's just because a fire started in the kitchen when the building collapsed, and then she thought that it was just really hot pizza. I don't know. She's also lost the lower half of her left arm, her left, not your left. Remember that, I've made that mistake. And she's also lost her right leg warmer. The casing on her midriff and right arm is gone, but other than that, she is still fairly intact. Her endoskeleton is, at the very least, especially compared to Monty. Also, interestingly enough, only Chica's white face melted, meaning that it looks like someone spilt frosting all over her face. Yeah, I guess that takes the term busted to a whole new level. But other than that, there aren't really any connections between her and Susie. Probably the most resilient animatronic in the group because, again, she's still kicking. Susie was possessing the yellow Chica, so I feel like this Chica being white is meant to show us that this is not going to be the same sort of situation. So I don't think that relating this Chica to that Chica or this Chica to Susie is really logical in this case. I think it's a bad idea, okay? No, I guarantee you that this is not going to be Susie, and if it is, I'm going to quit FNAF. Look, yes, she's blonde, and yes, Susie was blonde, but she was also blonde in 1985, okay? It's been 50 years since the missing children's incident in the games, and the original Chica animatronic was destroyed, and Susie's spirit was released, okay? Happiest Day does not take place at the end of the timeline. The pigtails on this girl are very reminiscent of Baby, but this girl has blonde hair, and while we may not be able to see her face, I feel like it is possible that she does have green eyes, okay? Because anyone with blonde hair instantly makes me think of Elizabeth Afton, not Susie. Since Elizabeth has more impact to the story than Susie, and even in the books, Baby ends up having more of an impact thanks to the Afton amalgam. And considering the blob that got introduced in this game is very much similar to that amalgam, this still makes the most sense to me, okay? But I figured that I'd go through the possibilities in separate videos just for good measure, okay? I'm not sure. Who do you think this little girl is, alright? Do you think it's Elizabeth's spirit? Do you think it's Vanessa's spirit? Do you think it's Susie's spirit? Or just some random stupid kid who wandered into a house of horror? Be sure you let me know down below. I'm still adamant on Elizabeth, but I don't know, maybe it's just a stupid kid. And honestly, you know what, if it's a stupid kid, they deserve it.